Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 463. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot Segulin, the Duke of and the elder statesman of the podcast. On this episode, we are also joined by Jace from the comic source blog.com, and they have a wonderful podcast over there, a wonderful website, and Jace is joining us because he was at WonderCon for the recent DC Rebirth panels. So we're going to go through book by book and talk about our reactions to the books, creative teams that are on there, what our hopes are for directions. And Jace is kind enough to come over and join us and give us some reactions on what the WonderCon event was actually like. So it's a very different, very special episode of Raging Bullets, and I want to thank Jace once again for joining us. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Once again, sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, this is the month of Rebirth, so this is a great time to start ordering the various bundles that they have related to Rebirth. Not only do they have the Rebirth bundles, but they also have the DC Universe Rebirth variant bundles, which are 45% off, only $31.61. They have the DC Kids bundle, 50% off, only $4.47. The new Hanna-Barbera books bundle is 50% off, only $4.97. A lot of great material coming out from DC, and don't forget to order the Rebirth special. They have that special at an amazing discount. It's actually 75% off, only 74 cents. That's an 80-page book for 74 cents, and that's the kind of savings that you can expect from DCBService.com. I want to thank them for continuing to support our show. Also sponsoring is InStockTrades.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, a big fan of the deals of the week. Over on the deals of the week, they've got Absolute Transmetropolitan. This amazing hardcover is 50% off, only $62.50. If you've never read this book, I can't recommend it enough. Sweet Tooth by Jeff Lemire. Huge fan of this. The deluxe edition hardcover book 2 is 50% off, $14.99. Wonder Woman Earth 1 hardcover. This is great. 50% off, only $11.49. Superman hardcover Volume 1 Before Truth. 50% off, only $11.49. Those 50% off deals are a great way to stock up on books. Be sure to check out InStockTrades.com. Jim, we're really lucky on this episode that Jace is joining us from the comicsourceblog.com. And Jace, you reached out to us because you were actually at WonderCon, and there, in the midst of all this, it's a big time for DC. They got this Rebirth thing going on, and you got to be a part of the event. So you were kind enough to join us to kind of share some of your experiences at the con and at the panel. Jace, welcome to Raging Bullets.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's a real pleasure. I love your show. You guys, doing it for 10 years. I have my own podcast, been doing it for a while. I hope I'm still around in 10 years, but as much work as it is, it really shows the passion that you two guys have. So, let me officially say congratulations on 10 years.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's this kind of stuff is what makes it nice. As you well know, the fact that podcasting has got such a great community has, for me, been the joy and being able to do new experiences like this. So having you on is really great, especially in light, there's for our 10th anniversary, there's big stuff going on at DC to talk about.
As far as being at WonderCon, I wasn't necessarily going to cover WonderCon this year. It's kind of cool being that we do this, we get press passes and save a little money there. But I wasn't necessarily going to go to WonderCon this year. I was actually planning on going to the Silicon Valley convention, which was the weekend prior. But then when I heard DC Rebirth news, it was kind of like, oh, well, I have to go. I have to be in the room because, much like you said, you can get a lot of the news on the various comic book websites, but there's no substitute really for being in the room and then having the access to the creators immediately following, because there's just such an atmosphere of excitement and anticipation, and it's not something you can get from reading an article on the internet.
No, there's an experience. We've had the option to be there before when DC's made announcements at like New York Comic Con and things like that, and there's something to that about actually being at the con and being able to be a part of those panels. That's really great. What was the vibe like when you went in? Like, were people, I don't know if you had a chance to kind of feel out the vibe. Were people overall positive, tentative about DC's announcements? Was there an excitement level? What was going on there? Because On the internet, obviously, there's kind of a, the usual tentative, some people are real snarky about it, some people are excited, and as usual, people fall in the middle. We were actually talking about Batman v Superman beforehand, and talking about how there's those different pods for that. Rebirth has been very similar in what I've seen as far as interest-wise on the internet.
So I showed up, the panel was supposed to start, they're supposed to start letting people in at 9. I showed up at 8, thinking I'd be, pretty close to the front. I think, and they actually did a count because they didn't want people cutting in line. I think I was 60th in line, and I was an hour and a half early. So that just shows you, how many DC fans were there that were really anticipating this. And I actually, then I found out later there was a press line, so I didn't feel like I needed to stay where I was. So I took advantage of the opportunity, and I actually interviewed some people in line for my podcast. And I'd say excited, but a little tentative, a little apprehensive. One of the things I really took away from talking to people in line was that they were all excited about the fact that Jeff Johns was going to be more involved. And that was a big thing for a lot of people. If he was going to stay more active as kind of an overseer, kind of like a showrunner, if you will, of the line, that was something a lot of people had confidence in. I never knew so many people had such confidence in Jeff Johns and his vision for the DC universe. And I know, I was actually at one of the New 52 panels in 2011 at San Diego, and there was kind of that same sense that if Jeff Johns stays involved, but then I think with kind of DC's explosion on TV and, him being the chief creative officer and having to oversee that, there's so many moving parts and being involved, I think he did kind of step away and the comics did kind of slip down. Now, if you watch the video, you'll see that he says, comics are his passion. They're his number one passion. So there was that sense as I talked to fans that were waiting to get into the panel that if that is true, if he's really going to be involved and kind of overseeing everything, that then they have more confidence in the line. So the line got huge in that hour that I was waiting. It snaked all the way out the building, outside, started wrapping around the building. So yeah, tentative. I think just based on the recent track record of DC, some of the things they've tried haven't worked very well. And I think like you were saying with, the way the internet is, people get snarky for whatever reason. I personally don't understand it, that they seem to be more willing to give Marvel a pass on constantly rebooting with number ones or putting out 100 books, just throwing them at the wall to see what sticks. And then when DC does something, everyone's quick to jump on, the bandwagon of let's, hate on DC. Let's make fun of Didio and Jim Lee and whatever. These guys don't know what they're doing. I personally don't understand it. I try to stay objective and look at it. And I think that there's been mistakes on both sides for the big two lately. And so I didn't get that sense. I think a lot of the people that were in line, obviously they were DC fans, and there was a lot of excitement. And I had a chance to talk to some retailers. In fact, at my local comic store recently, he expects it to do well for the first few issues, but it's going to be story quality that keeps people coming back. So, if they can do what they say they're going to do, which is, legacy, core of the characters, if the execution is done well, I think this can be a big win for DC. And as we all saw with the New 52, a big win for DC in the marketplace is really a big win for the comic industry overall.
Yeah, part of my frustration, I'm not just a DC Comics fan. I'm a comic fan in general. And I actually like it when, Marvel's trying something new. I like it when DC's trying something new. I think for us as fans, that's always a good thing. They have to be judicious with that, though, because, constant reboots and things like that do alienate fans. And if there's one mistake that I think DC's made that's been pretty clear just from fans that I've seen who have a consistent argument, it's typically around the legacy part. They want that legacy still a part of what's going on in DC. I've been loving the New 52, so I fall in that category that I think what they've been doing with the books are really interesting. That doesn't mean that every book was a home run. That wasn't the case in the previous universe for me either. But there certainly was enough titles that I was finding a great deal of enjoyment on, particularly the work of Scott Snyder I'm really digging. But Tom King's doing great stuff over there. I've loved what Gail Simone's been doing. There's a number of writers who are doing unique and interesting things over there. Robert Venditti. But I think what they've done is there's a fan base that has been saying, I want more of the legacy. I want more of the history piece in there. And I largely agree with that. I miss characters like the JSA. I like Earth 2 a lot. But the JSA, what worked with that is its longevity and its history. The Bat Family, its longevity and history there. They put a lot of that back in place, but it was very compressed. Things like Batman and Robin Eternal and stuff like that have been trying to bring in characters like Cassandra Cain and Azrael and Spoiler back into the mix. And it looks like that's the route DC's heading. They're looking at what properties do we not have now that fans have been missing. that they would like back again. How do we get that back into the universe? How do we get people excited about that again? I'm curious to hear from you, Jace, what, titles are coming out of this. Creative teams in particular start to make me excited. I want to know who they put creatively on some of these books. Can we start with, I believe they started off talking about the Bat Family. Can we start talking about that?
Yeah, I just have a comment about what you said. I think as far as losing the legacy, because I agree with you, some of the stuff they were putting out was really great. But I think for a lot of fans, it's like, okay, well, yeah, these comics are okay in and of themselves, but the whole reason we're DC fans and what made DC special, what kind of differentiated it, like especially for Marvel, is that sense of legacy. And so I think fans were upset that they kind of got rid of, for them, what was the best part of DC, which was, this, like you said, this longevity. And as far as the constant reboots, I think what publishers are learning is that every jumping on point is also a jumping off point. Yeah. So you have to be careful. So, yeah, they actually started the panel talking. I want to just touch real quick. They talked about the Rebirth special that is going to be written by Jeff Johns. Listen to this artistic lineup: Gary Frank, Yvonne Reese, Phil Jimenez, and Ethan Van Sciver doing the art. I mean, holy cow! And what's really cool about this, that Dan, you mentioned, $2.99, an 80-page special for $2.99. And so basically, this is going to be kind of the bridge. We're going to see where and I found this interesting, Jeff Johns specifically, where the New 52 fits in overall with the DC universe. Because when you think about it, the New 52 for this past 5 years or whatever has been the DC universe. And now we're going to kind of learn that the reason the New 52 happened, spinning out of Flashpoint, there's a specific reason for it. And could it be that it's just one more multiverse, or a multiverse of a multiverse squared, if you will? So the Image, listeners, go take a look. Just do like a Google search, DC Rebirth special. You're going to see that image with Superman reaching out to touch this hand, kind of a la the Sistine Chapel. And so no hints on who the hand was, but we're going to find out. And they also teased it as the biggest secret ever in the DC universe, the biggest reveal. So that has me excited, just learning. And again, I'll echo what the fans in line said with having faith in Jeff Johns. The fact that he's orchestrating this, it's a way for them to have their cake and eat it too, but they're going to do it in continuity, a story reason to bring back the legacy of characters. And a lot of hints supposedly have been in recent months, Titan's Hunt. And we'll talk about some of those titles as long. Titles they couldn't really talk about story-wise. We learned what the creative teams were, but not necessarily story-wise, because it was going to tie so closely into those in continuity reasons for the reboot. So you guys must be excited. 80 pages, $2.99. This creative lineup, right?
Well, and the artistic teams that are involved in that are people that have a history with Jeff Johns, so they understand his writing. They understand how to deliver great stories with his writing. So I think there's, for anybody who's a Jeff Johns fan and a fan of the teams that he's worked with, that really is, they put together a who's who of people who've worked with Jeff Johns before. That gets me excited too, because he knows how to write for them, if that makes sense, and they know how to respond to the writing they're getting from him, because especially, Ethan Van Sciver, who was such a part of Rebirth before anyway. It's great to have those type of people involved with this one shot that's kicking it all off. I'm glad, actually, for storytelling reasons, that they aren't telling us everything. I don't want to know. I want to read it, enjoy it. Give me everything I need to get excited. It is very much like what they did with the Star Wars trailer, I think, when that came out. I liked that it gave me enough of a tease to get me excited for the appearance of certain characters and things that were going on, but it didn't tell me so much of the story that I felt like, oh, geez, now I know everything that's going to happen. I want the same thing with this. Give me enough to get me excited, get me enough to pick up titles that are new or are being seriously revamped by this, but let me experience them in the title itself. I don't want to go through and be reading the title and go, oh, I already knew this was going to happen. That doesn't help me.
Like you mentioned, they started with the Bat Family. They brought out the creators for the Bat Family. The level of excitement in the room was very high, but I did kind of sense, maybe heard a few whisperings, oh, where's Scott Snyder? There's no Scott Snyder. So that was, I found that to be interesting. But yeah, everyone in the room was very excited. They brought the Bat Family out, and they started off, the first title they talked about was Batman, it was kind of a known secret, if you will. Tom King was going to be the writer, and I'm a huge Tom King fan.
Me too.
I've known Tom for a while. He's a great guy, a very personable guy. If you're ever at a convention where he's at, I highly encourage you to go and say hi. He loves talking comics, very passionate. Been doing some really, really great work. So he's going to be the writer. David Finch and Mikkel Janine are going to be the pencilers on the book. So big shoes to fill for Tom King. He was one of the creators that had the most interviews scheduled. I wasn't able to sit down and talk with him as far as recording for my podcast, but we do have an interview scheduled later on. He's gonna come on the show. So I kind of felt like maybe that was better. I'd get a little more time because, like I said, he just had so many press people that wanted to talk to him because obviously Batman's been the biggest book for DC, their biggest success spinning out of the New 52. So it is going to be tough to follow that run from Snyder and Capullo. And I think what Tom is doing, what's interesting about it, is he's not really trying to follow in their footsteps. He's really taking a different kind of spin on it. It's going to be a much more action-oriented book to try to give it a different feel. And from what I was learned from talking to Dan Didio is the first issue is he described it as almost like an issue-long chase. It's really going to kind of set the tone and really give you a feel for what the book's going to be like going forward. So if I have any concerns about this, it would just be that I love David Finch art. I love Mikkel Janine's art. What he's been doing on Grayson, especially in the action scenes, is great. I don't know that their two styles are that similar. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it because being that some of these twice-a-month books, they have an art team. It's not just, penciler, inker, colorist. There's more moving parts than that. And they're all kind of approaching it differently. Jim Lee and Dan Didio, the executives at DC, decided to let each creative team kind of figure out on their own what would work best for them. So some people are going to be collaborating together, even as far as working on the same pages together. Others are going to do alternate arcs. What the Wonder Woman creative team is doing is very interesting. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So I don't know what these particular artists are going to do as far as if it's going to be one arc David Finch, one arc Mikkel Janine. So that is my one concern. I just don't want it, if it's issue by issue, it may be a little jarring, especially if someone did in a trade. Like I said, I love both their work individually. So it's going to be interesting to see how they gel together and if we start seeing some influences from one or the other kind of bleed into each other. So I expect it's with Tom King on the book. It's Batman. I expect this title to do really, really well.
I'm actually really excited by the fact that they're letting the creative teams kind of work together to come up with a decision on what works best for their particular title and direction and the teams themselves. Because I already know, we'll jump to the Wonder Woman piece when we're ready to talk about that. But I like that that's very story driven in how they're handling it. But obviously, in this particular case, it may look differently and probably should look different. And I actually like that because there's a number of titles that are doing this bi-weekly release. We're going to get twice a month on the book. I like that it's driven by the needs of that creative team. I think we're going to see some unique and interesting things if handled correctly. That could either, be brilliant or, depending on the teams involved, it might not. But there's some really real heavy hitters in the whole lineup of creative teams that are coming up. So I've got high hopes that works out together. You're right about the differences in art styles there. That has to be handled carefully.
And one thing, let me say also, a sense I got when talking to Dan and Jim was that they're aware of this as well, and they're ready to make changes on the fly if need be. If something doesn't work, if they need to take a book off of that biweekly schedule and go to a monthly schedule, they're totally open to that. They don't want to be so committed to, okay, this is what we said it was going to be, so this is what it's going to be.
Right.
To the detriment of the line. They want this to work. They are all in.
Now, do they lay out with some of these these twice monthly books, whether it's going to be part one is this, part, issue one is, week one is this, week two is this, or did they kind of only for a couple of them? How did they give us, how much information did they give us on that? Did they actually lay out what Batman's going to be? Or, because I know they did with Wonder Woman, but with all the other, there's a lot of twice monthly stuff. Did they lay that out, or are they still leaving a lot of that open and unknown?
I think they're leaving that up to the creative teams. It's not an editorial dictate on how it's going to work. Each team is deciding for themselves among the artists and the writers. So, and there was a lot of creators, I think they're still kind of solidifying that. They're not 100% sure what exactly is going to work because in a way, it's still kind of early. They're still until they see the reception that the fans give. I think then they'll be ready to make changes. So there wasn't a lot of detail. I think the ones where we did get information, like what's going on with Wonder Woman, were the teams that really came up with a great idea and were really excited about it and wanted to share that. And it just seems to be working so well for them. So they kind of had an idea already. Wow, this is working so well. It's making the work stand out for us as creators, and we've all been doing this a long time. So we realized that, yeah, this is going to work. Whereas some of the other teams, I think they're still kind of in a feeling out process, and it's going to be when those books get released that they're going to be able to really understand if what they're doing is working. So to answer your question, not really. We didn't really get that information on how exactly all the books are going to work. I think most of them are taking more of a traditional, straightforward approach to it. It's just going to be maybe a different artist on different arcs. So you wouldn't really notice that it's necessarily a bi-weekly book because, one artist will be working ahead and maybe do, a 4-issue arc or 6-issue arc or what have you. And then it would just be like a different artist coming on the book for the next, run.
Yeah.
So, they get a chance to work on that arc, and then they get a little bit of a break, probably maybe a week where they can kind of relax, and then they're going to dive right back into the following arc, so they're alternate like that.
And I do like that. I do like letting the creative team control this. Guys like Tom King, I trust his strategy that he's going to play this out, and it's going to, flow nicely, and we're going to get something cool out of him. So he's one of those writers that are on my list of, I trust this person. If his name is on it, I will read it, and I will let it happen.
Yeah, and from what I understand, David Finch was really itching to get back on Batman, because we know with the New 52, he was both writing and drawing for the Batman the Dark Knight title.
He was obviously doing so much work on Wonder Woman with Meredith Finch doing the writing on it. So it's nice to get him back in the Batman universe to see what that's going to look like. And obviously having the creative team from Grayson, the artistic creative team from Grayson, being involved with what's going on with the Batman book has got me really excited, because you mentioned before the action sequences in that, and I think that was always a key of the Grayson book for me, was the way that it handled action. It's a book that is action heavy, and my gosh, the flow of those sequences were absolutely stunning in the way that the panels, there were changes to panels that were handled in such a unique way that the panels were used almost to deliver the action as well. So it's going to be great to see that done in Batman itself, which in a premiere title.
Yeah, Mikhail Janin's become one of my favorite artists. His stuff is awesome. And what's really cool, so we're going to get him, we had him on Grayson, which was just an amazing book. Now we're going to get him on this iconic character, Batman. But in between, he's going to be doing some work for the Super League story. So we had him on Grayson. It was amazing. We're going to get him on Superman, and then we're going to follow that up with him on Batman. Oh, man, it's so great.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see him on Green Lantern someday, too. I think that would be amazing. He's just so dynamic with his art style.
Yeah, it's really nice, actually, that we're seeing a lot of these creative teams that have been working well taking more of a leadership role at DC. And that part, I think, that's got me really excited. And that we're bringing some new blood in as well. I want to see some new people trying some new things. I think there's going to be some excitement revolving around there. Detective Comics has me particularly excited. It's kind of when I was first looking at that lineup, I'm like, wow, this has a potential to be a sleeper hit. Because it's James Tynion IV, who I don't think gets enough credit for the great storytelling that he's doing, because he seems to be really involved in a lot of titles. He'll do either be a co-writer or do a backup feature or be involved in a miniseries, and this seems to be a writer who really is bringing in a lot of the characters that I really enjoy again. It's a boot camp run by Batman and Batwoman, and it's going to have, spoiler, Tim Drake, Cassandra Cain, and of course the wild card of Clayface. It just has a lot of potential to be a very unique and interesting book.
First, let me say, when I covered a show recently in Long Beach, the Long Beach Comic Expo in February, and James Tynion was there, and even went to a writer's panel that he was on. And this guy is constantly working on his craft. He's not, he came in as kind of a friend of Scott Snyder, a former student of Scott Snyder, and that was kind of his foot in the door. But this guy is deservedly getting much more higher profile because he's constantly working on his craft. He's very passionate. And when I talked to him at Long Beach, I was like, off the record, anything you can tell me about DC Rebirth, he's like, I'll get in trouble. But I am so excited, and you're going to be too. And so when I got a chance to talk to him, to interview him after the panel, I was like, you were so right, James. I am so excited. It's those two terms, Batman team book, Batman boot camp. I am in. I am so excited. And like you said, Sean, all these, spoiler, what the heck is Clayface doing there? And he also talked about the difference in styles and approaches. So Batman feels like he's training this younger generation of Bat family characters so that they can go out and continue his mission with confidence and with capability as kind of solo heroes, on their own. Whereas Batwoman, coming from her military background, sees it more as building a Bat army. And so we're going to see those two ideologies, they're going to bump heads at times, and that's going to create some friction and some good conflict, which makes for good storytelling. So, yeah, again, I'm very excited about this book. Eddie Barrows, Alvaro Martinez on art, both very strong visually, especially Eddie Barrows. I know on one of my co-hosts and my son Jaden, he's a huge Eddie Barrows fan. So I expect this to be an extremely well-received book, and I expect it to be very well done because, like James Tynion said, this is the Batman book that he's been waiting to write his whole life. So with that kind of passion and that kind of excitement from the creator, this book is going to be just amazing.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Jim.
I'm also excited about Tim coming back with an original looking costume and just kind of going back to his roots. And I'm kind of, because we saw through the Batman and Robin Eternal kind of recurrent return of the Tim Drake that I really enjoyed in the past. So in my head, I'm thinking we're going to get a continuation of that journey. We're going to get Tim Drake Robin back, he's keeping the Red Robin moniker, but it's still that same person that I really enjoyed when he first hit the scene.
Yeah, well, I think James, he grew up reading Bat books in the 90s. And so for him, I think the version of the characters we're going to see, the version of Tim Drake, the version of Spoiler, they're going to be, to some extent, those versions that he grew up with. Obviously, they're going to be updated a little bit, but, those are going to be the roots of the characters. Again, getting back to that core, getting back to the legacy feel of the characters, being that these are the versions that he always wanted to put together on a team. And now this is his chance that they're going to feel familiar. You know what I'm saying?
That, to me, is, if there's one thing that comes out of this, I think that's what people need. It's for a fan who stepped away to walk back in and feel something familiar. I didn't step away, so I think that's going to be the trick. You have to be very careful because you've got a crowd right now that's currently reading and enjoying the New 52. You've got a crowd that's your lapsed readers that walked away, they felt disenfranchised. You want to do a happy medium where you're not alienating your current diehard fans, and you're also meeting the needs of that crowd that needs to feel a bridge to come back and to get that familiarity that they've always had. And this balance that they seem to be doing, as I'm reading all of these announcements, every one of them feels like they have something for both of those crowds, which is a really important piece. Now it's up to the execution to continue to keep that balance all the way through. And if they can pull this off, it has the potential to be a home run hit. More than just a few issues, it needs to be a line-wide continuation of a home run hit all the way through. Nightwing was an interesting one for me. Tim Seeley, because honestly, Grayson is a book we were all just talking about. One of my favorite titles right now. Every time Grayson comes out, I just jump to it. It's a book that I love rereading the issues as they come out because there's so much going on in the story, and it's presented in such a unique way with the way that they don't do a lot of the narrative pieces. You don't know a lot of what's going on in the characters' heads. And I really quite like that different delivery method. I've become a big fan of that. So when I heard that Tim Seeley and Tom King were doing their own thing in the Bat universe, it's nice to see those creators kind of branching off now, being heavily involved in two different titles, in some ways being kind of a competition for each other to push the line higher. Nightwing, I'm ready for Dick Grayson to be back as Nightwing. I would have been happy if he continued on as Grayson, but at this point, to see him back as a superhero again, and done with a creator who understands Dick Grayson, has me really excited.
Yeah, Tim's really excited about this title, and from what he told me on Saturday, if his Twitter feed was any indication after the announcement, there's a lot of fans that are excited too. When there was the announcement in the room that he was going to be back in his black and blue costume, the room kind of erupted in applause and cheering, which I found interesting. I mean, because visually, other than the color, they're pretty much the same, cool looking costume. So I think, again, it's tapping into that nostalgia. The reason people prefer the black and blue to the black and red is just because it harkens back to a memory for them, a certain time and feel that the universe had. So when I was talking to Tim, he said he wants to keep the kind of the globe-trotting, adventurous feel that Grayson had, but but Dick's back as Nightwing. So you kind of think of it as a Grayson, Nightwing hybrid. Okay. So I'm going to be interested to see how the secret identity, if that plays back in it, or if people still realize he's Dick Grayson. But he said, Tim said basically that Dick Grayson's has learned these skills through working for Spiral, and now he's going to apply that more to the superhero world. He's going to, look around the globe and say, hey, look, here's this problem. I think I'm the one to be able to go and solve it. And so kind of a background theme with Dick looking at that, and a theme that I think Tim Seeley is going to try to use to make it relatable to us, to the readers, is that when you're growing up, you're kind of told a certain kind of thing by the authority figures in your life, your parents or, teachers, what have you. When you are presented with this particular kind of challenge or this particular kind of situation, this is the way you should solve it. This is the way you should handle it. These are the tools you need in order to do it. And this is the quote unquote right thing to do. Dick's kind of at a place in his life where he's going to start questioning those decisions. Is this really the right? This is how Bruce taught me. Is that really the right way? Is it the right? Maybe it is the right way for Bruce to handle it, but not the right way to approach that situation for Dick. So I really think that that's something that's going to be kind of an underlying theme, and maybe even more of a forefront kind of theme, is that questioning the methods. Is this really the right way to handle it? Because, let's face it, the comic books today reflect much more of real-world situations than they did even when I was reading them growing up as a kid. And so in order for these stories to be relatable, they need to kind of reflect the complications that are out there in the world. And a lot of things aren't black and white. There's a lot of gray out there. So I think that's something that Tim Seeley is going to want to explore. And with his skill as a writer, some of the other things he's done, Hack and Slash, his other creator-owned titles at Image, I think that I trust him that he can make it interesting and relatable while still exploring these themes that are kind of adult and complex, really.
You want to make sure that, again, there are people who've been reading and loving Grayson. So when you're doing this rebirth, you want a bridge where we're not throwing out what just happened to this guy. Yes, this is a jump-on point, and we're getting back to the core of what people like, where he's going to be Nightwing. And there's actually story elements in Grayson that will, I think, if they're heading the direction I think they're heading in, that are going to address some of the identity questions as well. I'd be curious to see how they play that out as well. But I'm glad they're not just dropping that, because it's been so good and so well received by fans that you want to feel like there's been some, again, going back to, we want legacy, we want longevity and things like that. If you throw that out the window and start this character over again, you've got a problem, because, again, you're taking away any sense of longevity. So this is an interesting, tricky balance that I'm really excited about with this. And everything that I've heard about this new Nightwing title has me excited for just that, the continuation of what I've been digging already in in Grayson.
Yeah, we should mention Javi Fernandez and Marcus Toe are the art team on that book. I know Marcus Toe a little. I'm not familiar with Javi Fernandez at all. So hopefully they'll be able to keep that kind of action feel that Michael Janine brought to the book.
Stuff going on with Batgirl and the Birds of Prey has me particularly interested, because these are characters that are really important to me. And I think they've been trying to figure them out in the New 52. We've gone some very different directions with these characters since the start of the New 52. They seem to be in a bit of an identity crisis. There was one direction for Batgirl, and then they switched to a new direction. And honestly, I liked both directions, but you, again, going back to the sense of longevity and continuation for these characters and continuity, drastic, jarring changes, a lot of times, that's where you have, as you mentioned, jumping off points. I want to see these characters defined, and I want to see forward progression. Hope Larson was talking about Batgirl and how the goal of this is for this character to be traveling around to start leveling up as a hero, some growth as a hero. That part has me excited, because I want to see Barbara's forward movement. She's a character that I feel is very important to the DC Universe, and I want to feel like this character has a certain level of maturity and a certain sense of growth to her. Continuing with that, I want the same thing from the Birds of Prey. This is a team book that has always been very important to me. I think that they're a team book that, if you understand what works about that team and the family aspect of it, but also the fact that this is a squad, and this is a squad that really can do positive things, if you can get that balance of family and squad, it's a team book that has a lot of potential as well. I'm excited in both cases for the creative teams on this to really take these characters and give them a direction. And they seem to be looking at the roots, what works for Barbara Gordon, but also what has worked in the past for Birds of Prey. Let's go to the core of that and bring that back into both of these titles. If they do it and they nail it, I'm going to be the happiest camper in the world, because Birds of Prey is one of my all-time favorite books. It is something that I think has been lost in the New 52, is that kind of concept.
Yeah, I find these two titles interesting. I don't know if they're specifically going to say Batgirl is flashback and Birds of Prey is present. Batgirl and the Birds of Prey is present time. Mm-hmm. Because my understanding, the Batgirl we see in Batgirl and the Birds of Prey is after this walkabout that she takes. And so when I spoke with Hope Larson, and I should mention real quick, Raphael Albuquerque is going to be doing the art. Batgirl's a monthly book, so it's just Raphael on the pencils. You know, his stuff's amazing, so I expect the art on this book to be very, very good. But when I spoke to Hope, she was talking about, my first question that I asked her was, who's Barbara Gordon to you? And she talked about, a 25-year-old who has a level of confidence but doesn't necessarily have an identity. So I find that interesting, Sean, that you're talking about how so far in the New 52, there has been these shifts, and who exactly is she? And so I think that the powers that be at DC understand that, and that's a starting place for the story. Maybe Barbara Gordon, we don't know who she is necessarily. Her identity isn't, stamped out totally, because maybe she doesn't even know who she is. And so when I spoke with Hope, she was talking about, people being that age, being that mid-20s age and trying to find themselves. And that's part of what this walkabout is going to do. She's going to level up as a hero, yes, but she's also on a journey to discover herself, who she is. Who does she want to be as Barbara Gordon, and who does she want to be as Batgirl? So I think that if she can tap into that and make it relatable, that this could be a very, very good book, and maybe even a seminal book for Batgirl as a character. As far as Batgirl and the Birds of Prey, Julie and Shauna Benson, sisters, again, a monthly book. They are coming from the television world. They're writers on The 100, and the artist on that's going to be Claire Rowe. Now, these two girls grew up as comic fans. Their dad introduced them to comics early on through a lot of Silver Age books that he read. And they're Batgirl fans. They're comic fans. They have read. It wasn't like they got this, gig as writers for Birds of Prey and had to go back and read it. No, they had read Birds of Prey. They had read it. They had loved it. They wanted to stress to me that they're not throwing out anything that happened before with Batgirls and the Birds of Prey. They want to respect what came before, and they want to keep exploring those themes that made Birds of Prey special. Family, sisterhood, support for one another. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you get along all the time. I certainly didn't get along with all my siblings growing up. And so that's, again, a way to introduce conflict into the story and make it realistic and make it relatable. And their first arc's going to be, there's a new Oracle out there. Clearly, it's not Barbara Gordon because she's back under the cowl as Batgirl. And this new Oracle isn't necessarily on the side of angels either. She's willing to sell information, sensitive information, sometimes damning information, to anyone who's willing to pay her price. So that's not something that Barbara is going to let stand. Someone besmirching her identity as Oracle. So that's going to be where the story starts out. And with the respect that these two women have for what came before, their love of Gail Simone and Nicola Scott's, in particular, previous work on the title, I expect this. If there's any title that can bring in old, readers that fans of one of the older properties, something that's happened before, this would be the one that I would say for sure you need to check out.
I'm so glad you said that, because these were two of the titles I was very nervous about, and mostly because I didn't know who either of these people were writing this character, these characters that I really enjoy and love. And, and I've got this, I was very worried about what was going to happen to Batgirl and what was going to happen to Birds of Prey, because I didn't know anything about them. So I'm very happy to hear that we've got fans and people who have a groove to who these characters are, and just going forward. For me, when you get especially on the writer side, when you get these writers who know these characters, who love these characters, that's where you get just the passionate and powerful stories from. And I'm very happy to hear that. I'm doing a happy dance right now.
Jim, did you know that the Huntress that's going to be in Batgirl and the Birds of Prey is Helena Bertinelli from the Grayson title?
That's what I was kind of thinking, because I'm looking at the cover image that's out there, and I'm like, that looked like her. I wasn't 100% certain, but I was like, okay, I was thinking probably was her from the images, and that was going to be my next thing I was going to ask if they verified, but you already did, so thank you.
Yeah, and so that's going to be, here Barbara and Dinah, they have this, this previous relationship, this sisterhood, and you're going to throw, Helena in there, and that's going to cause, friction. And again, maybe they don't start out as just friends, but, they're on this team, they're working together for common goals. And I'm very interested to see that character get more integrated into Birds of Prey and see where it takes it, and if it's going to reach that level of family feel that the previous Birds of Prey titles that we all enjoyed really had.
And you also got the interesting Dick Grayson connection between the two of those, because both Barbara and Helena had kind of a relationship connection with Dick Grayson. So I want to see if that plays out.
Are you kissing my boyfriend?
I want to see a cat fight. Because that'll be a good one between those two.
So what was the pop like for All-Star Batman?
Oh, as soon as Dan Didio said he used that phrase, okay, there's an elephant in the room, and everybody was kind of like, oh, what's he going to, not really sure. And then he said Scott Snyder, and then everyone was just like, oh, okay, here we go. Now we're going to find out what's going on. And this could be, I think this title and Wonder Woman are the titles that people at the show that were in the room are the most excited about. Just hearing that Scott Snyder's still going to be on Batman, almost a sigh of relief, but then that anticipation. Everybody wants that first issue of All-Star Batman in their hands right now, especially with this dream team of artists that are going to be on the book. So All-Star Batman, Scott Snyder, when he found out Greg was leaving the book, he realized he still had some stories to tell, still had some mythos in the Bat universe that he wanted to touch on, and decided instead of maybe going with one artist, hey, I have made a lot of friends in this industry, let me reach out to these people that I know and say, hey, John Romita Jr., let's do an arc. Tula Lote, let's do an arc. Jock, let's do an arc. Paul Pope, let's do an arc. And so he's going to go back, and we're going to see his back to the Bat universe, and we're going to see his take on classic Batman villains. So we're starting out with John Romita Jr., Scott Snyder. It's going to be a Two-Face story. And what's interesting is Scott is kind of stepping back in a way, and by that I mean he's decided that these stories are Batman stories and they're in continuity, but he's taking Batman out of Gotham for a couple reasons. He doesn't want to step on any toes. He wants Tom King to be able to tell his stories there and really make Batman his own. And it's also a way to bring something fresh to the line. I mean, how many Batman and Gotham stories have we seen? Mm-hmm. And I think if you look back, late 70s, a lot of those classic, more Batman globetrotting adventures, I think is something that he enjoyed reading when he was coming up. And so he's kind of try to capture that feel. So it's his take on Two-Face. So from what I understand, Two-Face is maybe changing a little as far as it's a different take on the character, something we haven't seen before. He's a hoarder of secrets, so to speak. And so the story is going to be that these other villains are out to get Two-Face because he has information that they basically don't want him to have. And so think of it as kind of like a road trip. Batman's trying to get Two-Face to a particular destination where he can be incarcerated. He's trying to get him there safely while he's being attacked on all sides. So that's going to be the first arc with John Romita Jr., as I said. What was really cool, Scott Snyder was actually the last interview block of the day on Saturday, because DC did things a little different this time. Normally, a couple weeks ahead of time of a show, you'll get emailed a list if you're on their press mailing list and say, here's who's going to be here, here's what time they're going to be doing be available to the press, sign up if you'd like to talk to them. Well, because they wanted to keep everything hush-hush and they didn't want everyone to know what creators were going to be there because it would give hints on who was going to be working on what books, what have you. They didn't do that this time. So it was a 3-day show, Sunday being Easter. They didn't want to schedule any interviews on Easter because, a lot of creators weren't going to be there. They're going to be spending time with their family. No interviews on Friday because, again, they didn't want to let any cats out of the bag because the press conference / panel was early Saturday morning. So all the interviews were on Saturday. So it was go to the press panel in the morning. That's what everyone saw in the live stream. And then after that was over, they cleared the room except for press. And there was a little half-hour Q&A with press. And then all the press kind of beelined it over to the DC booth because at that point, that's when you would sign up for your interviews. And so it made it for a little chaotic, a little hectic, but at the same time, it was cool because it was a level of excitement with everybody there at the same time. So as I said, Scott Snyder was the last one, and I was the last interview he had. So that allowed me to have a little more Scott than a lot of other people. A lot of other people had time for one or two questions. And so what I took away from talking to Scott Snyder, because we didn't just talk about All-Star Batman and Robin, we talked about his recent Batman run, was just how grateful this guy is for how well his work has been received. Because if there's no one harder on Scott Snyder than Scott Snyder. This guy wants every book to be a home run. He's constantly questioning himself and doubting himself, and that allows him to push himself, to tell new stories, and to constantly keep challenging himself rather than just phone it in. Because he knows at this point he could have stayed on Batman with whoever as an artist and just keep telling stories of, classic Batman Arkham villains and collect his paycheck and make a good living. He specifically told me that, but that's not who he is. That's not the passion that he has for these characters. He constantly wants to keep pushing, to tell new stories, to break new ground, things that haven't been done before. And so I think this All-Star Batman title is kind of a way for him to do that, to tell a different kind of Batman stories, maybe Batman stories we don't necessarily expect from Scott Snyder, with these all-star artists. And the kind of the frosting on the cake, if you will, is that he's going to take these classic Batman villains, put his on it, and allow those villains to have a different kind of voice. We as readers will see them in a different way that we haven't seen before. I mean, you say Scott Snyder, Batman book, people are automatically in. But when you hear him talk about it and explain this kind of thing, his take on these villains, and you see how passionate he is, I mean, you can't help but be excited if you're a Batman fan. So I'm super excited for this. I feel like Scott Snyder, he gets it. He gets how important it is to the fans. They're not just stories. This is a mythos. People are invested. And Bruce Wayne and Batman aren't just a character for him to write. I mean, he brings life to them, something he cares about, super passionate. And I cannot wait for this book.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Scott Snyder's role at DC right now, because it isn't just that he's writing All-Star Batman now, or that he's written Batman. Scott Snyder has taken on a leadership position there where he's working with new writing talent to cultivate writing talent in order to kind of promote that. And I honestly, when you talk about architects of DC right now, and we talk about Jeff Johns and how important it is, Scott Snyder's another one of those writers that you trust in Scott Snyder, right? So to have Scott Snyder involved in that role, in that capacity, has me really excited with where DC's headed. They've recognized this is a key talent. This key talent is bringing incredible storytelling. This is somebody that we want our writers to learn from and to grow from. And that part is something that really has me excited that DC's recognizing, first of all, here's the things that are working right now, here's what's not, and how do we use the things that are working to cultivate the things that aren't right now. I think that has me really excited for the company's direction behind the scenes, that they're recognizing that there is this need.
Yeah, and they set the panel that they had got to an exclusive. So, going forward, DC fans can have confidence that Scott Snyder's going to continue to produce good work for DC Comics, and he's teaching that writing class to, again, kind of, I think he cares not just about Batman, but he cares about DC and the universe, and he wants to make sure that it's in good hands. Clearly, he can't write every book. I have a feeling that he's one of those guys that would write and kind of wishes there were more hours in the day so he could write more books, because he's such an incredible idea guy. But if he can't write the books himself, at least he can help bring up this next generation of writers. So in a way, he still gets to touch all these books, through these students of his that he's bringing up through the DC Writers Program.
That part has me super excited. So now we've talked about the Batman family as we're going through, but one of the families that we need to talk to, obviously you jump from that onto Superman family, and what a lineup of creators that they have lined up for this particular one. That I'm particularly interested in, including Pete Tomasi, who I'm a huge Pete Tomasi fan. So I'm excited to see Pete Tomasi having such a big role in the Superman books. Yeah,
they brought out the Superman creators, and being that it was Batman versus Superman weekend, and Dan Jurgens is the first one on the stage, Mr. Doomsday, and I think it was either Dan or Jim that joked, you're going to be buying lunch every time from now on, Dan. So Action Comics returning to the hands of Dan Jurgens' classic Superman scribe, and also returning to original numbering. So what a perfect time to bring back the pre-Flashpoint Superman, the classic Superman character for a whole generation of fans. So we have Dan Jurgens writing, Patrick Zurcher, Tyler Kirkham, and Steven Segovia on art. Two Superman, a Superman and a Clark. Lex is trying to figure it out. What's going on? It's going to be very interesting. I had speculated that this was going to be the way they kind of returned the secret identity to Clark with the, if you've been reading the Lois and Clark title, we see that the pre-Flashpoint Superman's actually been in the New 52 universe for a long time, just kind of staying hidden. Doomsday comes to Metropolis. He feels he can no longer stay hidden. He makes himself known publicly. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor, as we've seen on the cover of that Justice League title, has kind of taken upon himself to take up the identity of Superman. And so there's going to be conflict there. We're also going to see there's a Clark Kent. I mean, we don't know for sure that this is the way it's all going to work, that it's the pre-Flashpoint Superman, the current New 52 Superman showing up as Clark Kent to reestablish that identity, and then Lex Luthor. I think that's going to be the dynamic, but we're going to have to read the story to wait and see. I'm also curious to see, so where does Lois fit in now that there are, two Loises, so to speak? Is that going to be like how it goes? So I'm very interested in this book. The whole Superman family of books, it's going to be interesting. Okay, so if we have the classic Superman taking over Action Comics, and then in Pete Tomasi's regular Superman title, is that going to be the classic Superman as well? Or is that going to be the New 52? So there's a lot of moving parts here. I feel like it's kind of a unique situation that Dan Jurgens gets to play with. And so I'm this is one of the titles I'm most interested in seeing. Dan was one of those guys that had a long list of press that wanted to talk to him. So I literally only had 2 minutes with him. And even if I'd had longer, I don't know that I wouldn't have. I'm just not the kind of guy in my interviews that asks for spoilers, because I like to read it for myself and discover for myself. But so this is one of the ones that I have in a way the most questions about. And I've always been a big Superman fan, so I'm very interested to see where it goes. And a really great art team too. And I hope Dan gets to stay on long enough that he gets to write issue 1000, because I think really for my generation, he really is the defining Superman writer, if you will. And so I think that would be really cool. Here's a guy that was touched the character for so long. I feel he has a good understanding of who Superman is as a character. He does a great job of making him seem so much larger than life and yet relatable with a lot of the emotions and feelings. He got to write the death of Superman. It would be great to see, and the return of Superman. And it would be great to see him on the book with issue 1000.
And the interesting part right now is it's an interesting playground for Superman right now. This would be an interesting time as a writer to come back to the character, considering everything that's in play in that universe. And I'm excited for that. I'm excited for this new Superman too, because now we've got there's a different Superman that's being created in this one, which we haven't really had a chance to talk about. So there's a whole new character from a Chinese culture that's coming in. And do they give details on that at all?
They did a whole lot of details. I have interviewed Gene Yang before, and so I have that previous relationship. So I actually talked to him. Again, he was one of the ones that had kind of a longer list, so I didn't get that long interviewing, but I did get a chance to speak with him after. I did ask him about his recent Superman run, if it turned out as he wished it had. And he said he was overall pretty pleased, but it was a pretty steep learning curve. This was really the first kind of traditional superhero book he's ever worked on. And so what new Superman is going to be, it's a Chinese character who really isn't that nice of a person. He enjoys bullying younger kids, and he just isn't really somebody that you'd want to be friends with. Somehow he gains Superman-like powers, and it doesn't just affect him physically, it affects him inside as well. And so we're going to see him kind of struggling with the way he's been in the past, and now he realizes, the mistakes he made. And so, and also it's going to be taking place in China, in Shanghai, which Gene describes as kind of a modern-day metropolis. So it's Gene really being able to explore some of his cultural roots, explore the Superman mythos in another culture, and also to explore something I feel he does very, very well. Gene has a way in his writing, and American-Born Chinese, his award-winning graphic novel, definitely is an example of this. Gene has a way of tapping into a lot of the angst that the younger generation feels nowadays, the uncertainty of the world that they're living in, what their place is in it, what is okay and what is not okay in a culture. Sometimes it seems like we're becoming too politically correct and we're all too thin-skinned. There were a lot of themes that he wanted to explore in his Superman run that I feel he did a great job. Superman being Superman, Clark Kent being Superman, regardless of what his power level is, but also feeling like an outsider. Gene being an immigrant himself, very familiar with that. And so those feelings of isolation, those feelings of loneliness. And so with a character like Superman, even though he lost his powers in the recent storyline, we kind of know that he's an icon. We kind of know at some point he's going to get his powers back. It's going to go back to the status quo. And so there's a limit on how much you can change the character. And rightfully so, there should be. You can't change the character so much that he stops being Superman and the character is ruined going forward. Eventually it has to come back to center. And so with this new Superman character, Gene's going to get a chance to explore some of those ideas in the Superman mythos even deeper. Now, one thing that I'm not sure about, and I didn't ask Gene about this because, again, I didn't want it ruined. He talks about him being a kid, but when you see some of the artwork, he looks like a much older character. So I don't know if it's going to be like a Billy Batson, Captain Marvel, Shazam kind of thing, or if he's going to be artificially aged. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, so that's going to be interesting. As far as the art team on the book, Victor Bogdanovic is going to be the penciler, and Richard Friend is going to be inking him. This is a newer artist in terms of DC. Started out working on the Arkham Asylum Digital First series with Richard. If you were to see Victor's artwork, it looks similar to Greg Capullo in a way, but a little cleaner, not quite as gritty. And he's currently doing the Deadshot part of the Suicide Most Wanted book. And Richard Friend, the inker, is a good friend of mine. He was at the show, and I was flipping through some artwork, some original pages from the Deadshot Most Wanted, and I ended up buying a page. I've wanted a Victor Bogdanovic page for a long time, and I ended up buying a page, very iconic scene where Deadshot kills his father. It's his first kill Deadshot ever commits. And so I have a feeling with being more of a high-profile work that Victor Bogdanovic is going to be a name that you become familiar with. Really excited for this book, not just because it's Gene Yang, who is probably one of the most genuine, friendly, sincere, and earnest creators I've ever had the pleasure of speaking with, but an artist that I feel is on the verge of becoming a superstar. So very, very excited for this book. I hope this is one, because I feel like it's gonna fly under the radar a little bit at first, just because it is a little bit of unfamiliar territory as far as what the character is and who the creators are. And so I hope people give this one a chance. I'm
excited for that, actually. It's an interesting take, and the artist I'm familiar with, because I've been reading all the digital firsts. I really like that delivery method. It's just something different. I'm a big fan of exploration in storytelling in comics, and the artwork has been really strong. So this one, again, has the potential to be a sleeper hit, and we're in an era where it's hard for sleeper hits to take off. And I hope this one winds up being one of those that, first of all, delivers an amazing story and then becomes and has the opportunity to grow into being a significant run if it delivers what it looks like it could, because the premise is great. I really like the premise. I think it's an interesting modern take on the Superman concept without changing Clark. This is about developing a new character who's a modern take. And actually, I think that's a better move to do. So this one is one that's on my radar, as I have high hopes for it.
See, with me, I was I trust Gene Yang's writing because what the current stuff he's doing in the Superman titles. So I'm like, okay, he's a good writer. I liked his work, so I wasn't, too worried, but there was something, that was kind of nagging, in the back of my head, because when I just saw the quick little blurb on about the teenager who gains a portion of Superman's powers and all that, and I was like, initially I was like, then just call him something else, give him his own identity and give him his own thing. But when hearing that the powers it's kind of like the goodness that is in Superman helps transform this guy, then I'm like, oh, okay, now I can see why we're keeping it kind of a connection to Superman. And it's one of those things where the more you learn and the more you hear, the more comfortable you are with it. And this is now one of those titles that I'm actually looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot about exploring that idea of Superman in another culture. And so, for that reason, you need to call him, Superman. And I find that, I don't know that much about Chinese culture, so I'm very interested to be able to learn, and I'm sure it won't be steeped in culture, but, Gene Yang, being Chinese himself, he definitely has a sense of where he came from and his roots. And so much like Jim Zub's Wayward, does a real good job of incorporating the mythos of those other cultures, and you're learning without even realizing you're learning by reading these incredible stories.
The Chinese culture is very interesting with how they look at life differently than we do. And I think that's something that I am very interested and very curious to see how that's going to get incorporated. Because, when you get the writers who understand that, their heroes are going to be different than our heroes. They're going to look and act and just have different type of motivational and just how they're going to process a situation. And that's something I really want to see, how we, seeing the differences, seeing the cultural influences on this hero.
So anyway, after this one, we start taking a look at books like Supergirl, and I'm glad to see Supergirl coming back. I'm going to be honest with you. My only worry with Supergirl was I was afraid that they were going to ignore the continuity that was already put in place with the New 52 because of the TV show, and they were just going to kind of whitewash everything. I have no problem with them kind of taking a look at Supergirl and saying, at her core, what has always worked about this character, and what have her best runs had. And I think it's important to go to that, but you also don't want to alienate your crowd. I've enjoyed her New 52 run so far, so I'd love, again, kind of a combination of getting her back to the roots of what makes this character work. I'm glad to see they're going to explore things like Cyborg Superman being her father and actually and touching on those things, while at the same time getting this character back to being what she really needs to be, a hero. Supergirl should be a symbol like Superman is. I'm loving the TV show right now. I do want what's working in the TV show to be something to look at and go, okay, this show's cool. What is it that people like about it? How do we incorporate that into the comic book while at the same time acknowledging the fact that there is a history for this character currently right now? That part is really what needs to happen with this title, and I've got excitement for this one because I want it to be that. And I know I'm asking for a lot from it to kind of pull a whole bunch of things together and make it work. But I think that's what this character needs in order for people to really identify with her again. And I hope that happens.
Yeah, this is an interesting. Steve Orlando is going to be handling the writing chores. We have Brian Ching and Emmanuel Lupacchino on art. When the images went up on the screen, you could definitely see the influence of the TV show in the visuals, especially her costume. And so I think that had a lot of people excited. When I sat down and talked to Steve Orlando again, he was one of the ones that had a long list, I think because of the popularity of the Supergirl TV show. So I got to ask one question, but Steve's so great that he answered it in such a way that it gave me so much information and so much hope, which is very appropriate when you hear what he had to say about this title. Steve feels like Supergirl's greatest superpower is her compassion. She cares so much, and that's one of the great things about the way they portray her in the TV show. That really comes across. And so, in a way, she's hope for the abandoned. She's hope for people who've lost things because she's lost. Superman was technically born here on Earth, sent in the birthing matrix, but that wasn't the case for Supergirl. She has a sense of what she lost, much more so than Superman does when Krypton was destroyed. And so, for Supergirl, the battle is really never over. Some villain is doing something terrible. Supergirl stops him or her, takes and puts them somewhere to be incarcerated. For Supergirl, that doesn't mean the battle's over and that she's won. Steve wants to make us as readers understand that Supergirl is the hero that will go back and check in and see, hey, how are they doing? Are they being rehabilitated? There's obviously a reason they were doing these terrible things. And so for her, she's going to be so relatable for people who've lost things, for people who are lost, for people who are doing the wrong things maybe for the right reason. And so he has such a unique take, and he's so passionate about showing this side of Supergirl that I think that combined with visuals that are very reminiscent of the show have the potential to make this a very good book, a really big hit that can turn in some good sales numbers for DC.
I hope that's the case because she's a character that I really love, and I've enjoyed reading the character since my childhood. And she's been a very fun character. I do think that kind of pinning down the basics of her have been... We're going to talk about Wonder Woman a little later. I think that happens... She has the same problem Wonder Woman has. I think there's writers who've touched on the character sometimes that haven't really understood the core of the character and have done interesting things with the character, but have often left out that key important piece. You're right about the compassion part. I think that's something about her. Supergirl always looks like, and she should be, kind of like the big sister that you want to have. You know, I mean, that kind of person that you want to be able to rely on and talk to, and there's a humanity to her that I think is very interesting with the character. And that's what's making the show work, I think, is the fact that you feel like you can hang with her. I think that's a unique thing in a superhero character, when you have someone that you're like, this is somebody I could feel myself talking to and actually getting some good advice from, and being able to rely on this person for ideas. But she also makes mistakes because of the fact that she is a little bit more human than other characters. And I like that part of her too, that there's a unique balance of a yin and a yang with her. I also hope that we eventually get to see this character have some form of relationship with Barbara Gordon, because I always quite enjoyed that in growing up, seeing Supergirl and Batgirl team up periodically. I think that these two characters are tailor-made, if they're understood properly, to be friends in this universe, and I hope it's something we get out of this. I've got high hopes for this book, and I hope it ends up paying off in the way that it sounds like it's going to. All right, we got to jump to Wonder Woman, just because we danced around this one, and I talk about art teams. I actually really love the way this is handling art teams, and I love that it's story-driven. There's going to be 2 different arcs running simultaneously. Each one has its own creative team on artwork. Makes a whole bunch of sense to me. I'm a huge Nicola Scott fan. You tell me that we're doing Wonder Woman Year One with artwork by Nicola Scott and writing by Greg Rucka, I'm in. I mean, no brainer. The fact that Greg Rucka is going to be writing both story arcs that are going on simultaneously, yeah, I'm in. This book has me really, really excited right now because of the fact that it looks like we're getting to the core. Wonder Woman right now, obviously, because of the movie, she's a character who is on the radar. You know, she has her own movie coming out. She's been in Batman v Superman. In the comics in and of herself, this is a character who really, right now, it's a great time to do something interesting with this character. Having her bi-weekly has me really excited.
Yeah, if you would have told 15-year-old me that Wonder Woman would be the book I would most be looking forward to every month, I would have told you were crazy. But this book, every Wednesday when it comes out, is going to be absolutely my first read. You know, I know Nicola personally. She is just such an amazing person. And what's funny is, so Liam Sharp was on stage. He came on stage when the rest of the Superman family of creators came out. Greg Rucka was kind of like, okay, they asked Liam some questions about art. And, you know, he said, I'm getting these pages from, you know, this mystery a writer, and I don't know who it is, and, you know, kind of playing it up for the crowd. And then, you know, Greg Rucka was announced and came out on stage, and everybody was just so excited, you know, because right or wrong, when he left DC, it wasn't on the best of terms, and so I think a few years ago, people would not have believed that this was possible. But he is good friends with Jeff Johns. Jeff reached out, they were able to smooth things over and bring him back for this. And what's funny is I was in the midst of sending Nicola a message about Greg Rucka being on Wonder Woman, just because Nicola Scott Wonder Woman is her number one hero, without question. She grew up reading Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is the reason she draws comics. And so I'm in the midst of sending her this message, and Greg starts talking about who the other artist is. And they put an image up on the screen. He says, I don't know if you recognize that art. So I look up from my phone and I see it's Nicola Scott art. And I thought I was dreaming. I was like, wait, this can't be real. Yes, it is. I'm so excited for this. I'm so excited for Nicola personally. This is a dream project for her. You know, the work that Greg Rucka and Nicola Scott have been doing on their creator-owned book, Black Magic, at Image has been outstanding. And so for those two to be working on this book with Liam Sharp, who's a legend in the industry, I mean, how can I not be so excited? And if there's anything that puts a cherry on top, I had never met Liam Sharp before. You know, I'd seen him in passing, but I'd never had a chance to talk to him. He is so excited. You know, he has kind of stepped away. He established founded Made Fire, and that's where his focus has been for the last 5 or 6 years. And now this is a chance. He said he's been itching to get back to the drawing board. And so this was his chance to get back at drawing a monthly book. I think there's a generation of newer readers that aren't that familiar with his work, and they're in for a real treat. And so when I talked to him, he was actually the first interview I did. He was so excited talking about Wonder Woman. And we had touched on how at San Diego last year, I talked to David and Meredith Finch, and one of the things that really struck me about what Meredith said was when she related to the character, trying to get in touch with who Wonder Woman is and the strength of her as a female character, she really looked to the relationships that she had with her mother and her sisters growing up, and how she felt like it was kind of an homage, making Wonder Woman this powerful female character, someone you could look up to, a role model. It was kind of an homage to her sisters. So I asked Liam if he felt that, and he said definitely. You know, his wife, his daughter. He's totally a feminist. He joked, but he did do some drawings in the '90s that maybe didn't necessarily reflect that. But hey, it was the '90s; nobody had clothes on then. But I'm sitting there talking to him about Wonder Woman, and he's got goosebumps. He's so excited to get back on the drawing board and tell the stories of this character. Yeah, like you said, Sean, interesting that this is the way they chose to do it. So Nicola is going to be drawing every other issue, and that will be the story of the past. They're calling it Wonder Woman Year One. Liam will be drawing the odd issues, and those will be the Wonder Woman in present day. And what's Liam told me that was really cool is, so Nicola is going to be doing some design work for some new characters and such that we're going to see in the Year One storyline, and then Liam gets to age those. We see those designs 10 years later, and how battles and just life have changed those designs and aged those designs. So with the level of excitement and passion that these three creators have for this character, I there's no way this can't be my favorite lead. It's going to be so good. And I feel like, because again, Wonder Woman is a character that is iconic, known worldwide, but in a way sometimes suffers from different identity problems, just because there doesn't seem to be a definitive way to tell stories about her, a definitive run or definitive look. There's been certain runs that have stood out, the George Perez 87 relaunch forefront among those. I have a feeling that this run by these three creators could be a seminal work. It probably is going to rank up there when they're done with that George Perez relaunch in 87. So yeah, super excited. But I don't know that my level of excitement for this book can reach the level of excitement these creators have, and that perhaps is the best news of all for Wonder Woman fans.
Yeah, you always want that. You want to feel like the creators are just as excited as you are, or more, because they're the ones that have to deliver this month in, month out, and keep it going and have a long-term plan. Here's what I really want out of the Rebirth, and I haven't really mentioned this anywhere in this discussion. I want runs out of this. I really want creators with a direction that leads to a run, not an arc, a run. And there's a huge difference. I love runs that build into future story arcs. You have this story arc that leads into this story arc that leads into this story arc, because of the fact this was a long-term plan for these. So many of these characters, I think, have had great concepts in the New 52. And I think in the best series in the New 52, if you take a look at Batman, what do we love about it? Scott Snyder's run. I mean, it was a long run that built upon itself over time. I think the characters that failed in the New 52 are the ones that were constantly being reinvented throughout the process, and they didn't quite get enough substance underneath them, enough direction underneath them, that you could really follow what that run led to. And so there's a lot of titles where I feel like I'm excited that they're continuing what has worked well, and they're bringing in elements from the past to add to that legacy concept. They're hitting all those pieces that I've been enjoying and clearly opening the door for new fans. There's other ones that I'm excited about. Hey, it's a great time to really rework this character and give this character a long-term direction and run. So I hope that comes out of this. Wonder Woman is a title I'm with you. I could not be more excited about this one.
There are times when we do an episode that I just sit back and listen and kind of geek out, and have fun just, hearing the excitement going on. And I got to say, with this Wonder Woman discussion, I'm sitting back here going, yay, 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 doing my happy dance. Because, man, I got to just echo everyone's sentiment here that I am so much... If you would, like what you said, if you'd asked me, 15-year-old me, how exciting I would be over Wonder Woman, I would have laughed in your face. And even when we first started doing the show 10 years ago, I wasn't that strong of a Wonder Woman fan. But now, especially, you tell me who's working on it, both writing and artwork, I'm doing backflips and I'm doing just, hooping and hollering here. But the one question I do have, did they talk about because we're doing Wonder Woman year 1. Did they talk about Daughter of Zeus or Lump of Clay? Did they say which one she's going to be?
No, and I didn't ask. Again, something I want to wait and see for myself. But I trust these creators, and I have a feeling that that's something that will be addressed because, as I said, I have a feeling in Greg Rucka's hands, he's going to want to really establish an identity and exactly who Wonder Woman is. And I also want to mention real quick, Liam Sharp is such a genuine guy. It was a real pleasure to meet him beyond his excitement for Wonder Woman. And you can go and follow him on Facebook if you want to see. He's been posting a few previews of art, and it's just stunning stuff. But another thing that he talked about that very night, he put a post up on Facebook, and it touches on something we were talking about earlier. He talked about how overwhelmingly positive all the feedback he was getting on social media was, and he was saying what a pleasure that was, and kind of a departure from how the internet responds to comic news in general, and DC Comics in particular. And he was just very, very grateful for that. He says, I'm taking it with a grain of salt because I'm sure when the issues come out, here will come the criticisms. But he's a creator that's very accessible, very, very friendly. So if you're a Wonder Woman fan, you want to see some of the artwork as it's being in process, so to speak, I definitely would suggest going and following him either on Facebook or Twitter. He's, like I said, a very genuine person. He really shares of himself beyond just his artwork.
I would also say this. It's funny you're mentioning this, and it's probably a good time to bring this piece up. A lot of creators do that. They put themselves out there on social media. Here's the thing. You got to remember, this is, if you don't like somebody's work, or it's not hitting a home run with you, don't butcher them on social media. Walk away. And the reason why I'm saying that is for those of us that are fans of those particular creators, I mean, obviously art and comics and preference is something that's very personal. There's three of us talking here right now, and our favorite book, if we went around the table, is going to be very different because we're three different people. And also our likes and dislikes and preferences on artwork and writing styles and things like that's going to be very, very different as well. I really appreciate nowadays that so many artists and writers are putting themselves out there on social media. And I'm going to say artists in particular only because of the fact that they're able to put up preview pages of their artwork to reach out to fans and let them see and get excited for what's coming down the pipe. I don't want those people being chased away from social media. It's a chance for them to try things out, to have open dialogue and discussion, to get that work out there, but also to excite their genuine fans out there. So, I think there's a difference between having an honest commentary where, you're trying to be kind and throw out a suggestion, attacking somebody. Don't attack somebody on Facebook or Twitter. If you're going to give constructive criticism, I think that artists do put things out there for the purpose of gaining constructive feedback. What do you like? What don't you like? Let me know. Those type of things are out there. But do it with kindness. Do it with respect. Do it with courtesy of the fact that they're putting themselves out there for fan outreach, not to be attacked. And there's a difference between criticism and an attack. I'm glad to hear that his experience is one that's benefiting from social media instead of chasing yet another creator away. Because I've heard horror stories where creators have been chased away from social media because of the amount of negativity. It's not criticism, it's attacks. There's a distinction between the two, and we as comic fans need to be cognizant. It's okay to share constructive criticism. It's not okay to attack somebody. There's a huge difference between bullying and criticism, and I don't know. I just think when you're dealing with a creator, be respectful that this is their life and their work, and they don't have to put themselves out there. They do it for the interaction with fans, and constructive criticism can be a positive interaction for them as well, as long as it's done with respect and courtesy. So just kind of keep that in mind. I love that he's having a great experience, and I don't know, I like to throw that out there because I think we are that generation right now where having this type of interactivity with our creators is something we've always dreamed of, and I want that to continue. I want it to be an open dialogue. I want people to be able to share honest thoughts and things, but I think you can be respectful and honest at the same time. I don't think the two have to be mutually exclusive. And that's all I would ask as a fan who really appreciates creators taking this risk now. Because I want to see more of it. And I love seeing preview pages. I geek out. It gets me excited for somebody's process. because I'm not an artist. I enjoy art. And when I get an opportunity to see the behind the scenes, this is where I'm at right now. This is what I'm thinking. This is the concept that I'm working on. It gets me to know the sensibilities of that artist in a way that just reading the comic would not give me. It's the behind the scenes stuff, the DVD extras that we love in film, right? We get that on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and, all these DeviantArt, all these other places that they're reaching out with. And I think it's cool. So I like to preserve that because I just think it's something that we as fans are enjoying the benefit of now. So after this, we start talking about the Justice League lineup, right? And Tony Daniel's doing the Justice League artwork. Brian Hitch is doing the writing on that book. And we got 2 Green Lanterns on the team. These are characters, in particular Simon Baz. I've been wondering what's been going on with him. He's a character that I think has virtually disappeared, who's now coming back in a high-profile way, not just on Justice League, but in the Green Lanterns book. I'm glad to see them bringing back some characters that have drifted into the background, so we can see some more development with them.
Yeah, a lot of excitement for this group. Clearly Jeff Johns' run on Justice League has been along with Batman, one of the most well-received books of the New 52. But now we're seeing Brian Hitch, who I feel like his Justice League America book it surprised me with, because I mostly know him as an artist. It surprised me with how well written it is. So we're going to see him writing the Justice League book, Tony Daniel and Fernando Pasarin on art. Now, when I sat down with Tony, he was very excited. This is a book he said he's been bugging Dan Didio to work on for like 10 years. So he's very excited. He talked about how great and smooth and easy the collaboration has been with Brian, especially them both coming from an artist background. So the big story there, and it's in a way, I think it's going to kind of continue with what Darkseid War has been and how Jeff Johns and Jason Fabok talked about how they wanted it to feel like a big event, but event within the series. And so I feel like the new Justice League is going to kind of continue that with these DC Universe events that are not necessarily going to be across different books, or they're going to be a mini series within itself or tie into other books, but these events that affect every corner of the DC Universe. But if you just want to read Justice League, that's all you have to do. You don't have to go pick up these other titles in order to understand what's going on. So the first storyline they're going to be telling is called The Awakening, and it like I said, it's going to be a big event. It's going to affect the DC Universe. It's going to be long-lasting changes, and it's going to be the iconic 7, the heroes that we know, getting back into touch with the legacy, back into touch with their roots, but still being very familiar, very recognizable. I have every confidence from what Tony told me about Brian's scripts and plots that Justice League is going to be one of those titles that really is a blend of the modernization that we've seen with these heroes of the New 52 and the legacy feel. So I expect Justice League to continue to be a very well-received title with this particular creative team on the book.
Especially with these characters, Jessica and Simon being a part of the Green Lanterns book. I think it's really great that we're seeing pairings. And that one's like a lethal weapon with alien technology. I actually really like that buzz phrase because those two characters seem like a natural for that type of relationship to be happening in that particular book. And Red Lantern's going back to being villains. I like that concept coming in. The concept of courage over fear. This is a great time to be a fan, I think, of these characters and seeing them come back into their own. This is taking full advantage of the fact that you've got 2 Green Lantern titles out there. Let's make sure that we're spotlighting as many of these characters as we can in a way that makes organic sense.
Yeah, exactly. And just like you, Sean, when Sam Humphries said, lethal weapon with alien technology, I'm in right there. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with any of Sam Humphries' work. I know he's written some titles for Marvel. But when I talked to him, he was very personable, very excited. Talked about, like you said, Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz being rookies, basically. And his book is really going to be Earth-centric. That Green Lantern's title. Robson Rocha on art, as well as Artie and Syaf. 2 artists whose work I really enjoy. So very Earth-centric, not necessarily going to tie in at this point. There's no plans to have it tie in with Rob Venditti's Hal Jordan book. But focusing on these 2 rookie lanterns, learning their powers, learning to like one another because they don't necessarily get along. And then, yeah, like you said, bringing the Red Lanterns back as villains. For whatever reason, Atrocitus and the Red Lantern Corps have decided that Earth is centrally important to the universe and they want to control it. So immediately what I took from that was, well, Sam, there's sure is a lot of rage on Earth, and if your rings are powered by rage, he said that's exactly it. If your rings are powered by rage, if that's where your group of villains get their power, why would Earth not be where you want to be in order to be as powerful as you can be? So I'm very much looking forward to the sense of humor that Sam's going to bring to this book, with the whole lethal weapon, alien technology kind of spin, but with a real genuine threat of universal proportion, really, with these Red Lanterns being on Earth and being able to tap into the rage around them. So very, very excited for that book. Because like I said, these new characters haven't had that much time in the spotlight, both Simon Boz and Jessica Cruz. I wondered even if the powers that be DC forgot that they had been introduced, because they really haven't had much screen time to this point.
The Flash book, Josh Williamson's taking over that book, and it's going to be the concept is going to be the Speed Force storm forming over Central City. Barry has to train all of these new speedsters that are coming in. Some want to be good guys, some become criminals, including this one who becomes a killer called Godspeed. That part's going to be really interesting. I know Wally West is. We're going to see Wally West finally become Kid Flash and bring back kind of the concept again of a Flash legacy, which is something that I've always enjoyed. I've always enjoyed Barry being this role model that Wally always looked up to, and that kind of relationship developing between Barry and Wally. I'm looking forward to seeing that continue on in the book. This speedster thing is going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, especially with there being villains coming right out of their city, and how that all plays out. The Godspeed idea sounds really interesting to me.
Yeah, Josh Williamson's very excited to be on this book. This, again, much like Tony Daniel on Justice League, something he's had in the works for a really long time. Has been bugging the powers that be at DC for a while. I have this Flash story that, not that he wants to tell, but that he has to tell. He's got this Flash story in him that he just has to get it out onto the page. There's no two ways about it. So he's very excited to be on the book. One thing that I think that he's going to do really well, the transition from what Rob Venditti and that creative team has been doing on Flash, I feel has captured the tone of who Barry Allen is, and kind of the brightness of Flash as a hero very well. And I think this book, more so than any other, is going to be a seamless transition in tone. I feel like Josh Williamson understands very well who Flash is, who Barry Allen is as a character. He's got some real trials and tribulations he's going to put Barry Allen through, but the tone is still going to be one where it's going to be very recognizable and a seamless transition.
Yeah, I'm excited about that happening, and Green Arrow, I think, is going to have, if I remember correctly, it's the same writers staying on Green Arrow. That tone transition is pretty important for me for those two books. Green Arrow for a different reason. Green Arrow's had like such a creative team transition throughout its entire run that I would like to see some continuation of concept. Flash in particular, Venditti's run, I've been digging what's been going on in the Flash, so I want that same tone. I want this to feel like a continuation of the character that I've been really enjoying reading, and big Flash storylines, which this sounds like it's leading into a very big Flash storyline. If you look back at the runs of Mark Waid, Jeff Johns, and Grant Morrison, what made those runs interesting in Flash in the past is the fact that they had epic storylines within that title. A lot of what we just talked about with Justice League. Flash is all about that. It is a character that can deliver big concept storylines that are really unique and feel like, in their own way, a huge earth-shattering event happening within the main book. If they key in on that, this has a potential to be another great book as well.
I was going to throw out just a quick kind of comment question, whatnot, with our new supervillain, Godspeed, because I'm looking at images of him and he looks really awesome. But other than the fact that he's erupting out of this thing, did they give us any indication on who he is or any information on him?
No, none. They're really keeping it close to the vest. I don't know if it's going to be a new character or someone we've seen before in Flash. We just don't know. I think Josh wants it to be a surprise.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it's one of those things where you look at the costume, it's very similar to a Flash style to him, because I'm looking at the images with the golden swoops on the side of his face, and of course the lightning bolt, but he's the white and yellow, and it's, on one hand I'm sitting there thinking, are they bringing back a Zoom or a Reverse Flash type of character? And it's it makes you wonder because they just had some pretty cool speedster dealings with that Barry had to deal with, and I'm wondering if this is going to be spun out of that, or I think that's in the fact that I'm thinking off page and I'm wondering what is it about this, what about that. That for me increases the excitement on what we're going to get out of the Flash.
So we got the Cyborg series coming, which is going to have John Semper, who's coming from animation. It is interesting the balance that they seem to have in this rebirth of proven comic talent, people who have been working in DC already, and new people who are coming in from either from outside DC, with this being some of their first work at DC, or coming from outside comics altogether into this. The concept of Cyborg and what he intends to do here, and really getting to the core of the psychological aspect of somebody who's going through, how much is machine, how much is man, and what is that like? I really like that psychological piece with Cyborg. I think it's something that really, when it's explored well, if you look back in classic Teen Titans, that was always an interesting exploration with the character, getting to the root of that and making that a big part of the Cyborg series, as well as getting us to know, because you want to know the man, you want to know who Cyborg is in order to really get behind him as a hero. And I think that part is pretty much a key, and it's a great time to do this for people who are newer to the character, who maybe are starting to look at him because of the movie. They're like, all right, I saw that cool concept in the movie. Maybe I want to pick up Cyborg now and try out this character. And I hope some of that comes from this, that we have some people giving characters a shot that maybe they haven't before. Cyborg's cool. If this is done right, this could wind up being a really interesting book as well.
Yeah, I think this book has a lot of potential. And again, something I said before, and I'm going to say it again. John Semper, super nice guy. Really engaging, very genuine. When you talk about bringing in these creators from outside comics, people that haven't written comics before, Julie and Shauna Benson fall in this category as well. Very passionate creators. Just because they haven't worked in comics before doesn't mean you shouldn't give their books a try. And John Semper, being a black man himself, having been around, he's in his 60s, he's been around a long time. He brings a lot of experience. Talk to him in the interview about myth. He feels like the stories that are told in comics, they're modern myths. Myth becomes story, and even subconsciously, as people grow up and they see these stories, either as cartoons. John Semper's come from the animation world, or reading comics. He said that he's been around long enough that he has people come up to him at shows that grew up watching his cartoons that he helped make. That helped shape who they are. I mean, it sounds silly, there's a cartoon and that's a role model, or there's a comic and that helped shape who I am. But that is our modern myth, and we all know that myth shapes culture, and it helps turn us into the people that we are. And so he does want to get into who is Vic Stone as a person. Does he still have a soul? Where does the man end and the machine start? And he's a black man in Detroit. So what does that mean, especially as it relates to today's society and the turbulent times that we're in? So it was a real pleasure to meet and talk to John. Again, super passionate about the project. He can't wait to get started. And I have a feeling it's going to be that Cyborg's in very good hands. I'll just put it that way. Yeah,
I'm excited for that mixture. And this is part of that cultivating talent that they're doing with Scott Snyder as well, I believe. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that turns out. I'm excited for that. I really am. Dan Abnett on both Aquaman and Titans. Being able to see Titans kind of get back to the core of what made that classic Teen Titans team work, but also Aquaman. getting that character back on track. I've been greatly enjoying the Aquaman book, but I know it's been, you can't argue when things, whether you've enjoyed them or not, have been dealing with a very mixed reaction. It's a book that has been very polarizing, where there's some people that really dislike what's currently going on with the character and some people who love it. Dan Abbott's a very proven name, and has written an amazing run with such a wide variety of characters across comics. I'm excited to see the take on Aquaman now and getting the classic Titans characters and doing some interesting things with them.
Yeah, and let me quick mention Paul Peltier and Will Conrad as artists on Cyborg. I can't wait to see Paul Peltier on Cyborg. It's going to be and as far as Aquaman goes, I find this very interesting that, even to the point that when Jeff Johns relaunched Aquaman with the New 52, it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke about how Aquaman gets no respect. And Aquaman's kind of the hero that people love to make fun of. Oh, he talks to fish, what have you. There is so much love for Aquaman, maybe never more so than now. And I don't know if that's because of Jeff Johns relaunching him and really kind of having a great take on the character. I mentioned I was interviewing people in line before the panel started. I interviewed a 14-year-old who was a huge DC fan, and I asked who his favorite character was, and it was Aquaman. He just loves Aquaman. So that was really, really cool to hear. So what Dan Abnett's going to do, what his focus on the book is going to be, it's talking about one of the things he finds interesting about Aquaman, which is how many roles he has. He's a husband, he's a father, he's king of Atlantis, he's a superhero, he's a diplomat, and trying to see how Aquaman really tries to roll all these different aspects of himself into one cohesive person so that he can be the best he can. We all know that you get pulled in too many directions at once. You don't do any one thing very well. And so it's really going to be exploring how Aquaman tries to really reconcile all these roles together. And he wants to kind of bring Atlantis more into the happenings of the surface world, kind of unify the world in a way. And there's a lot of powers that be in Atlantis that don't necessarily want that to happen. So that's going to be kind of the themes he's exploring. And then we do still have plans for that Rise of the Seven Seas storyline that Jeff Johns teased so long ago, where Jeff Johns himself is going to be working with Dan Abnett. That storyline is still on its way. So I'm sure a lot of fans of Aquaman and fans of Jeff Johns are anxiously anticipating that storyline.
And Jeff Johns mentioned that his role now is going to be more... And I'm not saying at this panel, I don't know if he mentioned this panel, but he is going to be doing more of a miniseries approach to the universe, which kind of lends itself to being more of a kind of an architect behind the scenes. If you're doing miniseries that would launch concepts, build bridges between one story arc and another, that place and role for him right now actually has me a lot more comforted. At first I was like, oh, only miniseries? Then I'm like, well, that gives him a lot of freedom to really kind of focus where he's needed, if that makes any sense, especially when you're trying to, bring back the concept of a shared universe, which I know is one of the things that they're really trying to do with Rebirth. Him being able to spot check in areas, I think, is going to really, help the universe as a whole.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And in fact, that brings us to Titans. Dan Abnett, Brett Booth on art. I'll just touch on the art thing really quick. I talked to Norm Ratman, who's the longtime inker collaborator with Brett Booth. He was at the show, and he said that Brett has been having the most fun he's had in comics for a really long time. And that's saying something, because Brett was actually going to leave Flash. They offered him a different book. He was going to leave Flash before the most recent arc that had Zoom. And then when he found out Zoom was going to be on upcoming arc, he's like, no, I have to stay. I have to draw Zoom. So he was having a lot of fun on that Flash book. So to say he's having even more fun working on these Titan pages, that's really saying something. And Norm told me that these are some of the best Brett Booth pages he's seen in a long time. So as far as story goes, we don't really know a lot of details. Dan Abnett is the writer, but he's been working closely with Jeff Johns because this is going to tie in with a lot of the things we've seen happen in Titans Hunt. We know it's the classic Teen Titans characters. It's going to tie in closely with why we're seeing this rebirth change, the in-continuity reasons. For some reason, I don't know that I can necessarily put my finger on what exactly Jeff Johns said that makes me think this. Maybe it was just him saying that longtime DC fans would be very happy. if there's one character that we haven't seen any kind of classic version of in the New 52 or any kind of throwback or whatever, probably the biggest character we haven't is the classic Wally West, who for a lot of DC fans is the definitive Flash. I have a feeling that this Titans book is going to have the return of the classic Wally West. I would not be surprised to see that at all. And again, it's not anything I could put my finger on why I think this, but I just have a feeling that's something we're going to see in this book.
See, it's funny you mention that, because one of the things I may have read this somewhere as a theory, but I can't, to be honest, I don't remember. So I don't want to say it's my original idea, because I think I read it somewhere, but someone was saying that Wally West is actually out there in the Speed Force, and he is that hand that they're reaching to touch. That's actually Wally causing this change about bringing this whole, it's the whole dealings with it becoming one with the Speed Force and all that things that he was able to really do so well when he was the Flash. And it's something they're going to pull through that way. That was the one theory I remember reading and seeing somewhere out there, that this whole change is coming about because of Wally.
Well, it certainly wouldn't be the first time we saw universal-wide changes brought on by a speedster, right?
Yeah, exactly. You figure the one Flashpoint, and now it's kind of reverting back by another speedster. And I think is, one of the theories that's been thrown out there that, first time I saw it, I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. I like that idea. I'd like to see them go with that. And the funny thing is, I say I'd like to see that. I'm not really a Wally West guy. I read his stuff and I digged it, but I'm not as adamant as all the other Wally West fans out there. So it's kind of weird for me to. I'm curious as to the story-wise, because he was such a great character, but I'm also curious as to what happens with our current version out there that's in the universe. If he comes in, is he somebody different? Is he in and out, or what's going to happen here?
How much of it did you read, though?
See, oh boy, I read the stuff with the kids.
So you didn't actually read the runs. You didn't read I didn't read the Wade's and John's and what Morrison did. You didn't
exactly.
You didn't read that stuff. I mean, that's where the fandom comes from. It's from those runs with those big epic story arcs.
Yeah, I never caught those stuff. It was, again, with the kids and all that. And so I was like, I digged Wally West as a speedster, digged him as a hero. But, that's why I don't have that argument, oh my God, Wally West love. But to be honest, he is a great character and he is a great hero. So he's one of those elements out there that a little bit about him, and you're still locked into him. You don't need to know everything about him to enjoy and appreciate the character.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. So they also talked about Harley Quinn and Suicide Squad. Obviously the Harley Quinn team's going to stay the same. That book's been very successful, so they're going to keep that team the same. And Suicide Squad looks like, as far as the team itself, is going to be close to the movie, but it doesn't look like they're going to be making drastic changes to those universes. But am I wrong on any of that, or did something else come out of the panel on that?
No, a lot of people, again, Jim Lee is such a huge name, and he really hasn't been on a monthly book in quite a long time, so that had a lot of people excited. So Rob Williams is going to be writing it, Jim Lee and Philip Tan on art. Philip Tan was hand-selected by Jim Lee to be his collaborator, who he wanted to help him out with pencils. They have an interesting idea of how they're going to do it. They're talking about trading off arcs, but also helping each other out when the story dictates it. So maybe if it's a flashback or a dream sequence or something that just needs a kind of a little tweak in art style that makes sense story-wise to be in the book, because they live in close proximity to each other. So they're both excited about having that opportunity. As far as the team, yeah, it's going to, it makes sense why this is the case. It's going to reflect who's on the team in the movie. So, I have no problem with that. They're all villains. So, not necessarily one as good as the next, but with Rob Williams handling the writing duties, I trust him. He's a good writer, that he'll have it make sense, and the relationship between characters will be something that they explore. Hope and redemption and second chances. Not really terms you would necessarily associate it with a group of villains. And one thing Jim said when I interviewed them was, if you're a villain and you do something to save the world, does that make you a good person? And it's concepts like that are really going to be explored in the book. But Jim and Philip both stressed this to me as well. Even though it's going to be a book that kind of explores those kind of serious themes, that it's going to be a very fun book. They really want to capture that tone and humor of the relationships between the characters, specifically Harley Quinn and Killer Croc, with Harley kind of being one of the, from a superpowered standpoint, one of the weaker members of the team, but someone who, because of the roots and where she came from, is actually, and this isn't something that a lot of people think of when they think of Harley Quinn, a very brilliant mind. And so the dynamic between, and the dichotomy between that and someone like Killer Croc, who is very powerful and yet intellectually maybe a little lower on the scale. So that was a relationship that Jim said that he discovered as they were plotting and working on the book going forward, and something that's going to be explored, and it has been a lot of fun for him to show visually on the page, just the relationship between those two. So I have a feeling it's going to have kind of the same sensibility of the movie, but it's certainly going to be its own thing, and going to continue to, as I said, explore those themes that have sort of been a theme of different Suicide Squads in the past, but it's going to be kind of more to the forefront this time. And yeah, that really stuck with me when Jim said that, if you save the world, does it make you a good person?
So then it looks like they closed out the panel with kind of like a speed round of some of the new titles. The new Teen Titans book with Damian Wayne, Super Sons with the son of Batman and Superman, Damian Wayne, and the son of the pre-New 52 Superman. That stuff is very interesting to me. They didn't say a whole lot about things like JSA or Earth 2, did they?
No, they didn't. There were a few titles, and you know what? I realized that I didn't mention anything about Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern. So just real quick, Robert Meditti writing, Ethan Van Sciver and Rafa Sandoval handling the art duties. When I spoke to, I call him V Diddy, again, a creator I know fairly well. He's very excited. We're going to see the Green Lantern return, the Green Lantern Corps return, Hal Jordan back in a leadership role. But this is, if you've been following the Green Lantern storyline, the Sinestro Corps has really taken over as kind of the quote-unquote police force of the universe. Sinestro has parked Warworld in the previous spot of Oa, Sector 000, and so he kind of likened it to the Sinestro Corps War, but if the Sinestro Corps were the insurgents, it's not like the Green Lantern Corps show back up in our universe, however they have them return story-wise and say, okay, we're back, we want our job back. It's not that simple. So I've been digging what Robert Meditti has been doing on Green Lantern. Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps is going to be kind of all the characters. It's not just going to be Green Lantern. We're going to see Guy Gardner. We're going to see John Stewart. We're going to see Kilowog. We're going to see all those characters that we've grown to love in the Green Lantern family of books. And he talked about the challenge of making sure everybody gets their screen time. So we're going to see different arcs focus on Kyle or Hal or John or what have you. So I think it's in good hands, and I'm excited. I'm excited to read about that. Yeah, there were several books in the panel that they just touched on real briefly. I don't know if it was because they didn't necessarily have any creators from the books. I have a feeling that was part of the reason, and maybe things that just aren't quite as solidified. And in fact, they were mentioned when they had the families on stage, like Trinity is a title that comes to mind. Francis Manapul writing it and art. He's going to be joined by Clayman on art. So, Trinity, we know it's going to be Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Beyond that, we don't really know much. Superwoman is another one. Phil Jimenez writing and also handling some art duties, along with Emmanuel Lupacchino. There was a lot of speculation about Superwoman as a title when it was first announced. Was it going to be the Earth 3 Superwoman? Was it going to be Lois? We just know that it's a new character. So I don't know if that's a new character or a previous character in a new role, or if it's going to... we just don't really know at this point, but the images they put up on the screen, Phil Jimenez, the art looked very, very good. Also, the Superman title, which you mentioned, Sean, Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason writing, and then Patrick Gleason and Doug Monkey on art. Again, none of the creative team were there, so I have a feeling that's why they didn't touch on it that much. Speculation is this will be the book that stars the current New 52 Superman. Well, as we talked about, the pre-Flashpoint will be in Action Comics. Again, we just don't know, but Peter Tomasi is a great writer. We know he's handling the Super League story that's upcoming in Superman, and I have a feeling this will be kind of a continuation of that same kind of feel, same kind of story. Green Arrow, which we touched on, again, Ben Percy staying on art. One thing that's interesting about Green Arrow, Jeff Johns specifically, they put the images up on the screen of Green Arrow. He had the goatee back. Again, it got a good reaction from the crowd. And Jeff Johns talked about when he sat down to work on the Green Arrow book and see where it was headed, there was that temptation to kind of keep it close to the TV show. But when he thought about it, all the best Green Arrow stories that he remembers having read, he always had the goatee. So it's going back to more of that classic look. And we're also going to see him meet up with Black Canary. So we have that going forward. Another book they mentioned, Red Hood and the Outlaws. Actually got a chance to sit down with Scott Lobdell. He wasn't at the panel, but he was at the booth later. I got a chance to sit down and interview him. Jaden, one of my co-hosts, huge Red Hood and the Outlaws fan. And Scott said this, and this is interesting, that they thought about calling the book Red Hood and the New Outlaws because it's going to be Red Hood with two new teammates. It's going to be Artemis and Bizarro. And one of the things Scott Lobdell talked about was the fact that this isn't necessarily something that Jason Todd wanted. Didn't necessarily want to be in this team. He doesn't necessarily want to be teamed up with these people. There's going to be an in-story reason why, but he doesn't necessarily like them. For reasons of sales, they call the book Red Hood and the Outlaws, but he says and this is even true of how he approached the New 52 book, Red Hood and the Outlaws. He doesn't want Jason Todd or Red Hood to be seen as a leader. Jason Todd as a character doesn't necessarily want that himself, but it's just this dynamic between these people, these three people relationship and how they relate to each other, and it's about how they don't start out as friends, and despite the fact that Jason Todd doesn't want anything to do with these two people, despite the fact that he doesn't want to be friends, that's the way the story progresses. It's a natural progression. And again, he talked about how that relates in real life. You meet people, and he specifically said, man, I'd meet people in my apartment building, and for whatever reason, they just rub me the wrong way. And, there's that person again. I keep seeing him, and I don't like them and whatever. And then he would get on the elevator with them one day and strike up a conversation and be like, wow, this person's a great person. I love this person. Just, having those preconceived notions that Jason Todd's going to go into the book with, and seeing how naturally they become friends, they become teammates. So, again, I think a relatable book, and I think fans of the previous incarnations of Red Hood and the Outlaws will be very happy about that. Hellblazer, another book, and I should mention Dexter Soy. He's a new artist to DC, and he's going to be handling the art on the book. The next book they mentioned was The Hellblazer, Simon Oliver writing, Moritat on art. Moritat, for those of you that were fans of the All-Star Western, Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray, really great artist. Oh, yeah. I feel like it's going to suit the Hellblazer title very well. And all we know about this is Swamp Thing is going to be in the book to start off with the first arc. So it's going to be John Constantine and Swamp Thing, and they're on a mission to save Abby Arcane. So I have a feeling that long-time fans of Hellblazer and Swamp Thing are going to be enjoying that. The next book, I'm surprised they didn't talk about it more, was Deathstroke, because they managed to get Christopher Priest back in the fold to write Deathstroke. Art by Carlos Paguglia, Igor Vitorino, and Felipe Wanatabe. Again, this is going to be continuing what Tony Daniel did in the most recent Deathstroke series, getting Deathstroke back to his roots as an assassin, but with more of an updated look for the 90s. The next title he mentioned, Batman Beyond, this had, again, a good reaction from the crowd because it's going to be Terry McGinnis back as Batman Beyond, with continuing with the same creative team, Dan Jurgens, Bernard Chang. What I found interesting about this is the fact that whatever's going to happen in story, whatever reason for the rebirth, is going to affect the DC future as well. Because for those of you that read New 52 Future's End, we know Terry McGinnis died and Tim Drake took over. So interesting to see that. Continuing with that same theme of a good crowd reaction, Blue Beetle, Keith Giffen and Scott Collins, Ted Kord returning to the present DC universe as a mentor for Jaime Reyes. So for fans of Blue Beetle, I guess this is the best of both worlds, getting the classic, beloved Ted Kord back, and the more powerful, in a way, Jaime Reyes. Hopefully, and if anybody can, I think Keith Giffen, he does such a great job of doing these kind of things where he blends the past and the current iteration of characters in very well. And then Teen Titans, like you mentioned, Sean, Ben Percy writing, John Boy Myers, excellent artist. Damian Wayne decides he wants to lead the Teen Titans. And so Jeff Johns specifically said, quote unquote, it's basically going to be Damian Wayne versus the Teen Titans. So I have a feeling that's how it's going to start out. That'll be the dynamic there. Now, Super Sons is interesting. There wasn't a creative team announced, but in the solicits that recently came out, we did see Chris Burns and Dennis Culver listed as the writers and Jorge Jimenez as the artist. And that the art we saw in the panel was Jorge Jimenez art. So whether that got released ahead of time and got changed, or whether they just weren't ready to announce it. Not really sure. But yeah, it's going to be John Kent, who is the son of the pre-Flashpoint Lois and Clark, and Damian Wayne's, so son of Superman, son of Batman. Just based on the artwork, and I don't know that this is going to be the artwork in the book. It looked like it was going to be a really fun book. And then they mentioned JLA, no details whatsoever on that. And I have a feeling that could be because it is also going to tie in very closely with the in-continuity story reason for Rebirth. And then a few books that people were wondering about, JSA, Legion of Superheroes. They talked about those just very briefly in the press Q&A after, that they are aware that those are properties that need to be touched by this Rebirth event. They do have plans for them, but they can only coordinate so many books at a time, and they don't want to rush things. And so they are aware, they are coming, so look for those announcements later. And books like, I was kind of, in a way, surprised that Jimmy and Amanda Harley Quinn were there, and it was included in the panel, because that one is not one that's really part of Rebirth. It's going to be just a continuation of what's been going on. Likewise with Earth 2 and Gotham Academy, which weren't mentioned, because it's basically those stories are just going to continue, not really going to be touched much by the Rebirth. So fans of those books don't need to worry. Those books are still going to be coming out with the same creative teams, continuing the same storylines. So if there's anything that I took away from the panel overall, it's how much DC cares, specifically Dan and Jim. They've been working really, really hard on this. And it goes along with something you were saying earlier, Sean, about not jumping on the backs of creators with all this criticism and negative thoughts. DC and Dan Didio and Jim Lee specifically as publishers, they don't go out of their way saying, hey, we want to launch this book and have it be terrible. We want to launch this book and have it fail. They work really, really hard. Dan, Jim, all these creators on the book, they're comic fans as well. They want to see these books succeed. They're doing their best. As I said earlier, what's good for DC is good for the comic industry overall. And so, yeah, I felt like this panel was DC listening to its fans, saying, hey, you guys messed up. You took away the legacy. You took away part of what was so special about the DC universe. And it was Dan and Jim standing up there on stage, admitting that they made this mistake, listening to the fans, wanting to get it right. DC cares. Dan Didio cares. I know he gets a lot of crap. Jim Lee cares. He gets crap, but to a lesser degree. But they're trying to get it right. They're trying their best, and if you're a DC fan that's gone away from the books because of the New 52 or whatever reason, I would say to you, just give this a chance. And if it doesn't turn out to be your cup of tea, then that's okay. You can change the channel. You can go to somewhere else. Lord knows there's plenty of good comic books out there these days. But I would say just give it a chance. If you're a lapsed DC reader, if you're a comic fan just looking for something new, I feel like there's a lot of good choices, a lot of diversity in this line. So, just give it a chance. That's what I would say. And yeah, I'm really glad I decided to go to the event. The feeling of anticipation and hopefulness in the room was very palpable. It was a really, really great event.
I would add one other thing to that. Don't bash or destroy before you've had a chance to actually read something, too. I mean, it's one thing if you see an announcement and you're like, you know what, I'm just not interested because, I've had a bad experience with that creator or something like that, or they just don't, hit, what I think, sensibility-wise. Okay, fine, I get that. But there's times where announcements are made and people will, annihilate it before it's even been released. And that really bothers me because it's very detrimental, I think, to the comic industry in general. When, if you're somebody from the outside who's trying to try comic books right now, especially, when you look about the amount of, forget DC superhero movies and comic book movies in general now are huge. It's a big, big market right now. If you were to come on to your average thread about comics, the amount of trash talk going on about product that's not even released yet would be, to me, disheartening to even why do I even want to read that? Nobody seems to like it. That stuff is really detrimental to this industry. And if you're a true comic fan, you want this industry to succeed. I'm not saying be dishonest about anything. I've never held that policy. And I'm also not saying be happy-go-lucky about everything either. I don't believe that either. I know sometimes people think I do. It's really not the case. It's more of a, to your point about jumping ship if you don't like something. I think that's what you need to do, and tell people what you've jumped to and why you like it. In the case of DC books, if you come back to Rebirth and find a couple titles that you're really liking, support them by throwing as much passion behind your positive comments on what you're genuinely digging about a book as you would about what you hate about another. That part is something that I think we as comic fans need to do better, is to be an advocate for what is working for us personally in the industry, because I can't speak for every single comic fan. Jim can't, you can't. Nobody can speak for every single comic fan out there. We all have different tastes. What we can speak about is what we're digging about particular titles that we're really enjoying. And that's going to connect with somebody who has similar sensibilities. And I think we need to do that for this industry because it's got a lot of competition now that it's never had before. I think the competition for comics is at an all-time high. But I also think the diversity of product is also at an all-time high. You mentioned jumping ship. It's so easy to jump ship if you're not digging a title now to the plethora of great product that's out there right now, especially when you talk about one of the things I really loved in a lot of your commentary. You were sharing some of the backstory of some of these creators and what other titles they've worked on outside of DC as a part of their history. And I think it's really important to remember that a lot of these creators, while they're new to DC, have had a rich history in comics and have had proven product and great stories that are award-winning in many cases within comics. So those are things that for people to be aware of, that there's a lot of choice out there now, and we as fans need to be advocates for that, so that way that product's getting in the hands of other potential readers. So this industry's around. I want this industry to be around 30 years from now, and I want it to have just as much product as it does have now, so I have choice, because I don't just read DC superhero comics. I love and adore them, sure, but I love the choice that we have in the industry now, and the talent pool I think is at an all-time high. You look in comics, the creativity that's available in comics right now is staggering. There's just so many great people in writing and art that are just pumping out great product every month for us. We're really, really lucky right now with what's available, and we need to support that, because I selfishly want that to continue. So I'm excited. This panel really had me very excited with the news, the announcements. To your point of them really listening to fans, I do feel, I listen to other people's criticisms, whether I'm digging a book and they're not. It's interesting to see. And there's a lot of commonalities in what people were missing from the DC universe, what people did not like about what was happening in the New 52. And it's very clear in these announcements that they're really trying to specifically target what their fans have been saying are problems. And I'm excited for that, while at the same time not alienating your fans that have been really enjoying what you've been doing. That's a tricky balance, and it looks like they're going to nail it. I want this to be everything that it looks like it's going to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Guys, is there anything else about Rebirth or this whole concept that we didn't get to talk about that you wanted to address? Jim, I know I always have diarrhea of the mouth, and you're fighting to get a word in. Is there anything that you wanted to mention in particular? And obviously, Jace, after that, if there's anything that Jim, is there anything I left out that you wanted to discuss? Or?
Oh, no. There was a couple of times when I'm sitting back just letting you go, and I'm sitting back going, testify.
And Jace, I'm leaving you last on that one just because before I even get back to you on that one, I want to thank you. You reached out to me via email and said, hey, it makes sense that we would have a conversation about this. It'd be a good crossover for us, a good chance for us to have a first dialogue on the program with this. I really appreciated the opportunity to have somebody on who's a fellow podcaster, obviously, for the cross-promotional piece, but also somebody who's there at the panel who has a passion for being able to share this kind of information. I really felt like I was at the panel because of your commentary, and I really appreciate you, first of all, giving us all this time today, because I know your schedule's pretty crazy, so being able to give us this kind of depth of time is something I really appreciate. I know the struggle of running your own blog and podcast, trying to find time to do things like this with other podcasts. So I really appreciated you giving us this time and the amount of depth to discussion. If there's anything that we left out, please feel free to throw it in on that. But I do want to personally thank you for reaching out and giving us all of this quality time today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, guys. I as much as I am busy, like you said, doing my own thing here, I always make time to listen to your podcast. It's one of my favorite things. I'm constantly updating my podcast on my phone. Oh, I wonder if there's a new Raging Bullets episode. So and I just felt like I could really bring something to the podcast to really, because I know you guys are more located, you on the East Coast, couldn't get out for this. I'm sure you wish you could have been there in the room. And so, yeah, I really wanted to give a sense that you were there. And I felt like just with some of the relationships I've developed since I've started doing the podcast, especially with the creators at DC, which I should give a shout out to DC PR people that were working the booth there. They did a great job considering the hectic and chaotic nature of it. And they always do. They're so friendly. So it's not just the creators. It's not just the executive side. It's really the DC family as a whole. This was kind of a new experience for them. And really a first in comics doing this kind of live stream panel. So there was a lot of moving parts. A lot of people worked really hard to put it together. So I want to thank them. And like I said, I just wanted to I felt like I could bring something to the podcast for your listeners, give them a sense just from the little bits from my interviews, little bits from being in the room, little bits from things that I learned in talking to the different creators there at the show. And so, I was really glad I was able to join you guys. And now it's your turn. I'll have to get you two guys to come over on my show, either together or separately one of these days, and just hang out. My podcast is not necessarily DC centric. We touch on a lot of different things, the TV side of things, movies, just all kinds of things, really. Like to do spotlight episodes, bring on guests whenever we can, much like you do. So, I appreciate the opportunity to come on and do a little cross promotion. The Comic Source blog. .com. You can go on there. You can see all the episodes of our YouTube channel are hosted there. You can also see our sketch gallery. All three of us that host the show collect original art sketches, so that's available on there. Of course, previous episodes of our podcast. So just come over, check it out, take a look, and like I said, guys, thanks a lot for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
And I'd actually be remiss if I didn't mention the amount of interviews that you've done that you're putting on your site as well that are really very cool. So I'd highly recommend everyone to please check out the website. It'll actually be in our show notes. So when you are listening to this episode, just feel free to go to the website or check the show notes of this episode and click on it and go and check it out. I really enjoyed this conversation a great deal. And again, thank you for your time today.
Sure. My pleasure.
Holy caffeine!
I want to remind everyone about our show website, RagingBullets.com. It's the place to go to find out news and information about what's going on with the podcast. It does feed into Twitter. We do have an amazing Facebook group community. I want to shout those people out. It's a great community of people. We also have a Facebook fan page. We also have a Google Plus pages. I'm on the PlayStation Network. Basically, however you want to interact socially, there's a way to find us, and we like interacting with all of you, so please feel free to add us to any of those pages. I want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. We love having you part of the show. We actually have some voicemails that are lined up for our next episode. Our next episode, we're going to be joined by Art Line as we discuss Batman v Superman. So if you want to get some voicemails in for that episode, please go ahead and do so. We'd love to have you a part of that discussion as well. Sponsoring us this episode, once again, is DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Be sure to jump over to DCBService.com if you are not using them as a comic book source. This is the month to start. They have the DC Universe Rebirth Special, #1. 75% off, only 74 cents. They have the DC Universe Rebirth Bundle, 60% off, only $22.61. It really is your source for your pre-order needs, so be sure to check out DCBService.com. I do want to remind you that they are a digital partner, so whether you're using Comixology or My Digital Comics, if you link those accounts, 5% of those purchases go towards your DCB service order. Just remember to use their website portal to take full advantage of that offer. Over at InStockTrades.com, Absolute Transmetropolitan hardcover, 50% off, only $62.50. Superman hardcover Volume 1, Before Truth, 50% off, only $11.49. Jeff Lemire's Sweet Tooth Deluxe Edition hardcover, Book 2, 50% off, $14.99. Wonder Woman Earth 1 hardcover volume 1, 50% off, only $11.49. Remember, they are your collected edition source. So if you're looking for trade paperbacks, hardcovers, absolute editions, omnibuses, whatever you're looking for, InStockTrades.com is your place to get all of those at a discount. Be sure to stop by every week and check out their special deals of the week. And they also have closeout deals that they're constantly running that are 70% off or more. So be sure to check out InStockTrades.com for all kinds of amazing deals. Our next episode, as I mentioned, we're going to be joined by a longtime friend of the show, Art Line, as we continue our celebration of 10 years of Raging Bullets by taking a look at Batman v Superman. We're going to follow up that episode with the following week. We're going to be taking an in-depth look at Wonder Woman, the contest, straight on through the end of that run. So it's a big action-packed episode we're going to be doing. It actually might wind up being a two-parter. I don't really quite know yet because there's a lot of material in there to cover. I've been doing a lot of reading on it. I'm really excited for that episode. We wanted to do something meaty for the anniversary and do a classic story, because we haven't done one on the show in a while where we've really talked cover to cover with a classic story, and we decided on this one to do a run. It is available on Comixology if you don't have the trade paperbacks or the single issues, so make sure to grab that run and be sure to join us for that episode. Anyway, we will see you all next week.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.